Undoubtedly, you may have read Psalm 13 before this morning. Many people love to read the Psalms, and therefore you probably came across Psalm 13. And since it's a short psalm, I'm sure you have read it. And as you read it, you probably could have related to this psalm, which was written by David, and it is a psalm to be sung because it was directed to the director of music. We could get hung up on the first two verses and define this psalm as a psalm of lament, as a song sung by someone who is going through a lot of trouble and trials. We can get carried away by the first two verses because they spring right out at us because of the repetition of the words, "How long?" 4 times the psalmist in these first two verses uses the words, "How long? How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily? How long will my enemy be exalted over me?" But if we read the entire psalm carefully, we'll see that David has very skillfully divided this psalm into 3 parts. The first part, consisting of the first 2 verses, is a lament where the psalmist is expressing pain. May not be physical pain, but there's psychological pain, emotional pain. There's some sort of hurt that he is expressing. And so we'll call these first 2 verses a lament of pain. The second 2 verses, verses 3 and 4, if we read them carefully, we'll see that they are a prayer, a petition, intercession. And the last 2 verses, verses 5 and 6, they are a praise. So if we would summarize this psalm, it is from pain to prayer to praise. I'll just entitle the message today, "How long?" How long? The first 2 verses, the lament, the pain, how long? Have you ever asked that question about something in your life? Have you ever said, "How long am I to put up with this? How much longer? I can't take it anymore." I suspect that there are several of us here today who have asked the same question as David did. How long will I have to tolerate this? How long will God let this happen to me? How long before my breakthrough? These are real questions that you and I ask at some point in our lives when we go through tough times, when we go through stress, when we go through pain. Life is not the fairy tale that we often think it is, even for Christians. Life is not always live healthy, wealthy, and happily hereafter. But life is full of sickness, hurts, pain, brokenness, and being broke too. And sometimes all of these things seem to last forever. And oftentimes you wonder, how long will this sickness last? How long will this pain continue? I've tried every doctor. I've tried all types of medication. I've tried every pill, every bush, and still no relief. How long? How long will this marriage remain broken? I've tried talking to him. Or he might say, I've tried my best to please her. But we still live like two strangers in the same house. And I can't take it anymore. How long? How long? God has been hearing this question from the beginning of time. In the Old Testament, it is recorded many, many times. And let me take you on a quick tour through the Bible and show you some of the times that this question was asked. Moses in Psalm 90, he prayed and he started out this psalm with, "O Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations." But somehow, down the line, the Israelites, they turned their back on God. They were disobedient. They went after other gods and they were punished. And Moses, in his prayer, he's saying, "Oh Lord," verse 13 of Psalm 90, "how long will it be? Have compassion on your servants. Remember us. Have compassion. We can't continue like this anymore. Return," it starts off with, "Oh Lord, how long before you return?" Asaph, a contemporary of King David, he was one of the music directors. In Psalm 74, verse 10, he writes, "How long, O God, will the enemy mock you? Will the foe revile your name forever?" And Habakkuk, the prophet, starts his book, chapter 1, verse 1, with, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear?" That was in the Old Testament. But God will hear it again in the future. There's a prophecy about the future. The future of the believers, and here's what they cry. You find it in Revelations chapter 6. John saw the fifth seal being opened, and he heard the cry of the martyrs. And here's what they were crying: "How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth?" This is in the future. But notice, as he continues to write, as John continues to write, then he says in verse 11, "Then a white robe was given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest a little while longer until both the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who would be killed as they were was completed." People are going to be killed for the sake of Christ. And the martyrs who have gone on before, their blood is under the altar, and it's crying out, how long, God? How long? Right today, as we speak, there are believers who are being martyred for Christ. It is said that in 2014, last year, researchers have calculated that 4,344 Christians were killed for their faith. And that's a conservative number. This doubles the amount of martyrs that were killed in 2013. And the largest number of martyrs occur in Nigeria, where in 2014, 2,484 Christians were killed. And the next deadliest country for Christians was the Central African Republic, with 1,088 Christians martyred for Christ. The Islamic extreme groups in Africa and Iraq and Syria and other countries in the Middle East are persecuting Christians like crazy, chasing them out of their country, while the blood of the martyrs cries out, how long? How long? In addition to the martyrs that were killed, there were 1,062 churches that were burnt or destroyed in 2014. And the majority of these attacks on churches took place in China. 258 churches in China. 116 churches in Vietnam. In Nigeria, 108 churches, and so on. And so Nigeria now has been added to the top 10 list of countries that persecute Christians severely. And we're all familiar and heard about the group of girls that was kidnapped by the Boko Haram group. And they kidnap and murder Christians. 165 teenage Christian girls were kidnapped. We're told that 50 managed to escape, and the rest risk being forced into marriage or forced in sales. Do you know how much they're going for? $12 a girl. $12 a girl. While the blood of the martyrs are calling out, how long? I can also imagine that these girls were calling out, how long before they find us? How long before they free us? In verse 1 of the psalm that we read this morning, David felt the same way. How long? He felt like God had forgotten him. He says, oh Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? David doesn't feel God anymore. You know, sometimes we go through life and we don't feel God. We think that he's not there, that he has forgotten us. David began to doubt if God was really there. He doubted if God cared. And so, asking the question 4 times shortly behind each other tells me that David was in dire distress. His situation was grave. Things were bad. And we don't know which particular situation David is referring to in his psalm. But if we look at David's life, We know that he was faced with many trials and sorrows. Perhaps he wrote this psalm during the time that he was on the run from King Saul. Even though he knew that God had a plan for his life, it seemed as if God had put this plan on hold and nothing was happening. And we can understand David crying out, "How long? I was anointed king, but how long before I can take the throne? Have you forgotten your promise to me?" Perhaps he wrote this psalm when he experienced the sting of God's displeasure with him after he had sinned so terribly by taking another man's wife and killing her husband. Whenever he wrote it, it is a striking picture of a frustrated, heartbroken man crying out again and again, "How long? How long? How long?" And once again, "How long? How long will you forget me? Forever?" Sometimes we are in that state where we're going through our situations and our stuff and our hardships and our pains, and we ask God, "How long is this going to last?" But I want to comfort you with the words of Isaiah. Chapter 49, verses 14 to 16, he says, "God will not forget us. But Zion said, 'The Lord has forsaken me, and my Lord has forgotten me.' But can a woman forget her nursing child and not have compassion on the son of her womb? Surely they may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you in the palms of my hand." I do that often. When I want to write a note and remember something, I write it on my hand. And God writes your name, your problem in the palm of his hand so that he doesn't forget you. He knows what you're going through. He just has to look. Aha, sister so-and-so is facing this. I haven't forgot her. Verse 2, the first part says, "How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart daily?" That word, "take counsel in my soul," actually means worry. How long shall I worry? How long? When we worry, we're talking to ourselves. You know, we talk to ourselves. He's taking counsel in his soul. And our tendency is that when we're stressed and distressed and oppressed, to take counsel in our souls, to look within, to block out everybody else, to shut ourselves away. We want to run away. Have you ever heard that? People who have problems want to run away. Take counsel in their own soul. Don't want to talk to anybody else. Want to be by myself. However, this doesn't help us with our depression and our pity party. Being by ourselves leads to more sorrow. When you are discouraged and depressed, the answer is not looking inside yourself, but it's looking to God. Inside yourself won't help because there's where the problem is. We need to look to God, who is the author and the finisher of our faith. Because the more we think of our problems, the more depressed we get. But if we can just pray about that situation, God gives a peace There's a song that we used to sing, just a little talk with Jesus makes it right, all right. How long will my enemy be exalted over me? David was defeated. He doesn't say which enemy. Perhaps it was Saul who chased him, and David was always on the run, living in caves, going from place to place, hiding from Saul. And he says, how long will my enemy be exalted over me? We don't know which enemy he was talking about. Perhaps it was the enemy of his soul, the enemy. After committing adultery and murder, David was crushed by his sin and by guilt. And we hear him saying in Psalm 51 verse 14, deliver me from the guilt of bloodshed. Deliver me from the guilt of murder. It's on my mind. I can't get it off my mind. I'm always thinking about what I've done. Deliver me. I'm depressed. And how long am I going to stay in this state? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? How long will I be burdened and pressed down? Deliver me. How long? Have you ever been there? Have you ever said those words? Deliver me from this situation. Wives, how long will this man continue to torment my soul? Some wives say that. And husbands will say, how long will this woman continue to harass me? How long is the pressure on the job going to last? We don't want to go to work anymore because there's pressure on the job. How long? We want to quit. How long will my colleagues on the job keep ignoring me and shun me and talking bad about me? How long will children continue to be bullied? And I'm saying that because just this past week I had the opportunity to go to the Christian Hillside School and do some sessions with the children. They were celebrating Anti-Bullying Week. And we're told that there are many children who don't want to go to school, who are sick because of being bullied and harassed in school. I can hear the young child who's being sexually abused by a stepfather or an uncle saying, how long is this going to last? How long? How long? You can fill in the blanks because you have a how long. Just want you for a moment just to close your eyes. Bow your heads. And in your mind, just talk to God about this situation that's been going on for so long. And just say to him, God, address it. How long? I know there are many of us, many of you. For years you've been dealing with a situation and you're saying, God, how much longer? When will it end? Will I ever get relief? Are you still there? Do you still care? Just tell him about that how long situation. Hallelujah. Oh God, how long will your children suffer? How long? How long, Lord? I had a colleague years ago in the Department of Education. Her name was Carmen Hughes. And whenever we were going through some tough times, she would say, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. The story is told that this particular saying came from an Eastern monarch who asked his wise men in the kingdom, I want you to give me a phrase, a sentence that will be true in every situation. And after much thought, they came back to him and they said, Your Majesty, the sentence that we've come up with is, this too shall pass. You can apply it to any situation. Sad situation will pass. Joyous situations, they're going to pass. Life is going to pass. Death is going to pass. We think death is the end. No, it isn't. It's going to pass into another life, either in heaven or hell. This too shall pass. The psalmist phrases it another way. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. From pain, we see the pain in the psalmist, and we want to look at the second part. From pain to prayer, verses 3 and 4. And he says in verse 3, consider and hear me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say I have prevailed against him. Lest those who trouble me rejoice when I am moved. In this prayer, David asks three things. He says, first, consider me. Secondly, he says in his prayer, hear me. And thirdly, he says, enlighten my eyes. Consider me, see me, look upon me. Don't turn your face from me. I am here. He didn't realize that his name was written in the palm of the hands of the Almighty, and that God was watching. But it seemed to him that God didn't exist. And it seemed to him that to God he did not exist. And so, as the young people would say, ta-da, God, I'm here. And while you're busy, God, tending to the galaxies of the world and space, would you see me too? Would you consider me? Would you take care of my problems? I know that you're taking care of the problems of the nations, but consider me too. Don't be too far away in heaven that you don't know what is going on in my life. Haven't we felt that way? Haven't we felt like saying the same thing to God? Whether our circumstances were job security or financial difficulties or marital problems, whether it was the death of a loved one or whether sickness struck, we felt like saying, God, I'm here. Remember me. Consider me. Don't forget about me. Look at what's happening to me. There's perhaps something going on right now in your life, right now, that you desperately want God to see. You want him to take notice. You feel that he has neglected you. Do like the psalmist did. Tell him about it. Consider me, David says. Secondly, he says, hear me. When I talk to you, I want you to listen to me. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 28, we hear King Solomon saying, Lord my God, listen to the cry and the prayer which your servant is praying before you today. This is how David approached him. Listen to my prayer that I'm praying to you today. I'm hurting. I'm taking counsel in my own soul. I'm depressed. I'm oppressed. Hear, O Lord, when I cry with my voice. Have mercy upon me and answer me, the psalmist says. The third thing he asked was to enlighten my eyes. What a strange request. David was taking counsel in his soul. He was worried. He was wrestling with his thoughts. He was stressed and depressed and oppressed. And yet, David didn't ask God to take away the depression. He didn't ask God to relieve him of his worries. He didn't ask God to take away the sorrow in his heart. In verse 2, he says, I'm oppressed by the enemy. It could have been Saul, King Saul, or it could have been his own sin, his own guilt that was weighing him down. Yet, David didn't ask God for deliverance from his enemy. He didn't ask God for deliverance from his sin and guilt. Instead, David says to God in his prayer, enlighten my eyes. What a strange request. But it was a prayer for understanding. If I could just get an understanding of what is going on, I can deal with it. I don't have a clue, God, of what's taking place. The Dutch have an expression that very good expresses this sentiment of enlightening my eyes, because you want to see it. Ik zie het zitten, the Dutch say. Ik zie het zitten. I see it sitting. Well, in English we'll say, I see it. And sometimes we don't mean we're seeing it physically, but we understand what's going on. We get it. And Paul's prayer to the saints at Ephesus was that the eyes of their understanding be enlightened. It is important that we get it, that we understand who God is. And even though he doesn't answer immediately, he's still there. It is important that we understand and get it, that God is sovereign and he does what he wills. We can give him the message and tell him what to do, but God is God. So we need to understand God. In the Old Testament, the story tells us about a prophet whose name was Balaam. On his way to Balak, king of the Moabites, the king wanted Balaam, the prophet, to come to curse the Israelites. And Balaam refuses to go. Finally, after several invitations, Balaam decides to go to the king. God spoke to Balaam, the prophet, the night before. He says, don't you curse those people. They are blessed by me. Balaam saddles his donkey anyway the next day, and on his way he goes to see the king. And on the way, the donkey sees an angel with a drawn sword. And the donkey turns the other way and goes into a field. And Balaam the prophet gets so mad at the donkey, he beats that donkey. The donkey then takes another route, and the donkey comes and walks between a narrow road, walls on each side, and in front of him he sees the angel again with the drawn sword. and he presses against one of the walls. He stops, presses against the walls, and mashes him, the poor prophet's foot. And the prophet got madder, and he beat that poor donkey sick. Get up, let's go. And donkey goes again, and this time the donkey sees the angel with the drawn sword. Meanwhile, poor Balaam the prophet doesn't see a thing. And the donkey sees the angel with a drawn sword standing before him again, and this time he just sits down and won't go any further. And Balaam the prophet got mad and mad and mad and beat that donkey and spoke to the donkey. He says, why? The donkey began to speak. He says, why are you beating me? Have I ever done this before? I've always been a good donkey. Balaam says, yes, you have always been a good donkey. And at that time, the Lord opens his eyes, and he sees the angel with the drawn sword. And then he realizes that the angel had seen something, knew what was going on that he didn't. But unless and when his eyes were opened, then he understood. The angel of the Lord said to him, why have you struck your donkey these 3 times? Behold, the angel says, I have come to stand against you, because your way is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned aside these 3 times. Balaam said to the angel, I have sinned. He understood. His eyes were open. He was enlightened. For I didn't know you stood in the way against me. Therefore, if it displeases you, I'll turn back. He was able now to determine his course of action because his eyes were opened, and he saw and understood what God was doing. He understood that God was behind it, and God was getting his attention. And sometimes when we're going through trials, perhaps God is trying to get our attention. Balaam understood that in his own stubbornness, God didn't want him to go, but he was disobedient. And if we, as saints of God and people of God, could just understand what is going on in our lives, why things are happening, why the pain, why the torment, we'd understand the purpose of our affliction. The Bible says that all things work together for good, including the hurt, including the enemies, including the bad marriage, including the wayward son. All things work together for good, including the gossip, including the insults, including the misunderstandings. Don't ask me how, but the word says it. It says all things work together. And the word says this, his ways are higher than my ways, and his thoughts are higher than my thoughts. And so what God is doing in my life, I just don't understand. But if he would just enlighten my eyes so I could understand what is going on. He's shaping me through the trials. He's molding me into a better person. Enlighten my eyes, David says. Open my eyes. The songwriter says, I want to see Jesus. In the Old Testament, when the king of Syria surrounded the city of Dothan, the servant of Elisha was greatly worried and afraid. The city was surrounded by horses and chariots. And when the servant saw this, all he saw was in the natural. He saw the horses and the chariots. And he says, "Oh, Master, what shall we do?" Elisha answered, "Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And the Bible says Elisha prayed and said, "Lord, I pray, open his eyes that he may see." And when his eyes were opened, he saw a whole different world. He didn't only see horses and chariots of the Syrians, but he saw a host of angels with swords and with fire. Elisha said to God, "Open his eyes." The servant was afraid. Servant didn't know what to do. The servant was worried. But when his eyes were open, things changed. There was no fear among him. He knew that God was in control. He knew that he could leave it over to the Lord because there was more for them than who was against them. Notice the second thing that Elijah did was to pray that the Lord close the other people's eyes. He said, "Strike this people, I pray you, with blindness." And so there they were, fumbling and feebling and don't know where to go, which direction to go. They didn't have a clue. They were worried. They were afraid because their eyes were closed. And David knew what he was praying for. Just give me some understanding of what is happening. That's what Job asked. If I could just understand what's going on. The servant's eyes were enlightened, and he saw. He wasn't afraid anymore. He knew that God was in control. On the other hand, the Syrians were blinded, confused, fearful, in fear, defeated, troubled. And when we're going through our long phase of how long, let us ask God to open our eyes. Open the eyes of our understanding. Why, God? See, if we understand people and why they're doing some things, that we'll be able to deal with the situation better. We were told that, bullies bully because they're hurting. They're bullied because they're bullying because they might be bullying themselves. Nobody may pay attention to them or love them, and so there are all sorts of reasons why they do what they do. But if we understand, we can help them. And if they understand why they're doing what they're doing, they can be helped. Maybe if I understand my spouse a little better. Bible says live with her according to knowledge. Maybe if I understand my boss and why he's so inconsiderate. Maybe if I understand why the colleagues at the job are so mean, I'd be able to deal with it better. Maybe if I see the motives of my enemies, I would be able to handle it a bit better. God, enlighten my eyes. Open my eyes. Open my understanding. Let me see it. The psalmist David moved from pain to prayer. Thirdly, to praise. Verses 5 and 6, but I have trusted in your mercy. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. In the last two verses, we see a big shift and a change in attitude. Verses 1 and 2, the psalmist was lamenting. He was depressed. He was complaining and worried. Sorrow in his heart. He was doubting, insecure if God had forgotten. But in verses 5 and 6, we see a different David. A David with confidence. He says, I trust in your mercy. I trust in your unfailing love. I have confidence, as the songwriter says, God is going to see me through. Doesn't matter how long anymore, but I'm trusting you, God. We see that he's rejoicing in his salvation. We see that he's singing. He says, because the Lord has dealt bountifully with me. The Lord has been good to me. I have trusted in your mercy. I have trusted. Past tense. David trusted in God because he knew who God was and what God could do. He had experienced God. And he knew that only God could help him. David knew where to take his burdens. He took them to the Lord and he left them there. Wow. What a different David. What brought about this shift? What brought about this change? This change in David can be attributed to verses 3 and 4. His prayer. David called on the Lord, and the Lord heard and answered. Psalm 91 verse 15 says, he shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. And with long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation. When we call on the Lord, he says, I will answer. No matter what we're going through, no matter how long we're going through it, God is able. He says, call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. I will deliver you, and you will praise me. I will deliver you, and you will sing unto me. I will deliver you, and I will enter your gates with thanksgiving in my heart. And I will enter his courts with praise, and I will say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad. He says, I will deliver you, and you shall give thanks and praise to his name. Why? Because the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. His faithfulness continues. The psalmist says, I sought the Lord. I sought the Lord in my distress, in my pain, in my problems. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all of my fears. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he heard me, and he delivered me from all of my fears. So often we believe that we're to skip the pain, and we're to skip the prayer, and we're to go directly to praise. Praise is important. But pain increases, magnifies our praise. From pain to prayer to praise. This is not the model that we really want to follow. We want just the praise. Some of us find it hard to pray. And don't ask about pain. We don't want to go there. Just give us the music and let's praise the Lord. But we need to go through the process. Donnie McClurkin sings, after the hurt, after the pain, and after the rain, I just stand. I just praise. I'll just stand and praise my God. I'll just stand and sing to my God. I'll just stand and magnify his name. I'll just stand and extol his name. For the Lord is good. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. The psalmist in the last verse says, I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me. I will sing to the Lord because he's been good to me. Yes, I've been through the pain. I've been through the hurt. I've been knocked down, but not knocked out. He has helped me to stand again, and I will sing to the Lord because the Lord's been good. In the day of trouble, I will call on him. I will deliver you, he says, and you shall glorify my name. Have you been through the pain? Maybe you're right there right now. Because life isn't always a bed of roses. Some of you may look good, all dressed up nicely, but going through a lot of hurt. And you're asking God, how long is this going to last? I can't take it anymore. That's what the psalmist asked, and we're told that he spoke to the Lord about it. He says, God, consider me. God, hear me. Give me an understanding of what you're doing in my life. Because if you don't, I'm going to sleep the sleep of death. Some of us are feeling that way. Can't take it no more. This is going to kill me. But when we talk to the Lord, he gives us grace to handle each situation. That we can sing and give him praise. So today, if you're dealing with some situations in your life, it's all right to ask him how long. But take the next step and say, God, listen to me. Hear me. Consider me. Give me grace to deal with this situation. Then I'll be able to praise you and give testimony of you. I'm here today to tell you that he gives more grace. When the burdens grow greater, he giveth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, he added his mercy. To multiplied trials, his multiplied peace. Shall we sing that song as we stand? One 101, number 101. He giveth more grace. When the burdens grow greater, He sendeth more strength. When the labors increase, to added affliction He added His mercy. To multiply trials, His multiplied peace. His love has no limit. His grace has no measure. His power has no boundary known unto man. For out of His infinite riches in Jesus, He giveth, and He giveth, and He giveth again. When we have exhausted our store of endurance, when our strength hath failed, ere the days have done, when we reach the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving is only begun. His love has no measure. His grace has no measure. His power has no boundary known unto man. For out of His infinite riches in Jesus, He giveth, and He giveth, and He giveth again. Musicians, could you just play for us? I wonder if you're here today and you're faced with a how long situation. It's crippling you, it's burdening you. You don't know what to do, who to turn to. And you're crying out, how long? We'd like to pray with you. Would you come to the altar? We're going to sing the first verse one more time. And as you come, I want to cry out to God on your behalf. How long? How long am I going to see adversity? How long am I going to feel the pain? How long is business going to be the way it is? How long? How long? Is there an end? Enlighten my eyes, oh God. Hallelujah. Is there anyone else? You're faced with a how long situation. When will it end? He giveth more grace when the burdens grow greater. He sendeth more strength when the labors increase. To added affliction, He added His mercy. To multiply trials, it's His multiplied peace. His love has no limit. His grace has no measure. His power has no boundary known unto man. For out of his infinite riches in Jesus, oh, he giveth. When the burdens increase, he giveth. Oh, he giveth. And he giveth. What does he give? He gives you grace. He gives you strength. Pray for enlightening of your eyes so that you can understand the situation. Because when you understand something, you can deal with it better. And I want to say to you, people are very complex. It's the people that cause problems. See, if there's a computer, we can fix it. If there's a mechanical problem, we can fix it. We can take it apart and put it together. But people, they are so complicated. And we try to understand them through ourselves. And we would say to ourselves, if I were so-and-so, I would do so-and-so. That doesn't work. But if our eyes are enlightened, if we can understand what so-and-so is going through and why so-and-so is doing what they're doing,